Hello and welcome to Kimbo's Music Connection, and in this one we're going to be talking about Abbey Road by the Beatles, and this was released on the 26th of September 1969 in the UK and in October in the US. Now, it was their 11th studio album and it had been recorded several months earlier, and it was really their final recorded album with them all together, though Let It Be was completed in April 1970. The cover is iconic and has been copied by many people, imitating that walk across the zebra crossing in St John's Wood. It's causing delays to the traffic in London when these people are all having their pictures taken on the crossing. Now, when we look at the original cover to the album, you have John Lennon at the front, followed by Ringo Starr, and then Paul McCartney and George Harrison doing that iconic walk across the crossing. The photo was taken from Paul's sketches as an idea, and the photograph was then taken by Ian Macmillan, who had only about 10 minutes to take these photos because the traffic had to be held up by a policeman. Now, when you look at the photo, you probably many of time have just taken a glance at it. But when you look really closely at the photo, you can see John and Ringo in shoes and Paul's in bare feet. And also, he's the one who's out of step. And then you've got George in shoes as well. Well, it was reported by CNN in 2018. Paul said in an interview, there was no special meaning to the fact he was barefoot. He said it was hot and he kicked off his sandals. I really don't get it, really. And then 3 years before this, there had been a rumour which was spreading that Paul was dead. And if you wanted to look for the clues, they were in the Beatles songs, and it had been replaced by a lookalike by the name of William Campbell. This is where it sort of reached a frenzy of speculation from this photo that Paul was in fact dead, which he wasn't. And the picture was a funeral procession, and John is the priest of God, George is the gravedigger, Paul is the corpse, and because of his bare feet, and Ringo is a mourner. There was some there we go. So right, we're going to go into the recording session now, and what was happening in the recording session. There was some tension between the band members, and John had brought Yoko Ono to the sessions, who also argued with the group. This came to a head when John had a bed installed after Yoko was ordered to rest after they had an accident, a car accident, and this bed was for during the recording session. Now, John wanted all his songs on one side and Paul's on the other, and that really, this was all part of that tension and disagreements which was going on within the band. In the end, they made an agreement to end by sharing the sides of the tracks. Lennon did not like the album and thought it was junk, calling Paul's song for the granny's song to dig to. Just bits of the songs thrown together. That was the sort of thing he says. So it's just bits of songs thrown together. Now, it was recorded on an 8-track reel-to-reel, which made it easier for dubbing, because before that all the other Beatles albums have been recorded on a 4-track reel-to-reel. So this was the first Beatles album in stereo as well. The mixing desk wasn't a valve desk. It was a solid state transistor desk called the TG console. Now, Alan Parsons was an assistant engineer on this, and later on he went on to be the engineer on Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon. And then there's another person who was also involved in the sessions, who went on to be an engineer and producer for the music score in Lord of the Rings trilogy, and his name was John Calendar. But we're going to talk about the album tracks now. Side 1, track 1, Come Together, was written by John Lennon. Now, he was in Montreal with Yoko Ono, sitting in a bed talking about peace. Now, this was known as the peace sitting. Now, in the opening lyric, Here Comes Old Flat Top, a lawsuit was taken out by Maurice Levy because it was taken from Chuck Berry's You Can't Catch Me. An agreement was made in the end. In compensation, Lennon would record 3 songs from Maurice Levy's catalogue on his next album, which he did. Now, track 2, Something, was written by George Harrison. During the White Album sessions, the idea came from James Taylor's song Something in the Way She Moves. Now, it was a favourite of Lennon and McCartney's. Now, it was originally given to Joe Cocker for his self-titled album, but it later went on to Abbey Road. It was released on a 45 single with Come Together on one side and Something on the other. And also it was their first single on the Apple label, and it made #1 in the US for 1 week in 1969. Track 3, Maxwell's Silver Hammer. Paul McCartney wrote this song on a trip to India. Now, the session for this recording session was a charged atmosphere. Paul annoyed other band members by wanting an excellent performance and an outcome. It was the first song John Lennon had worked on following his car accident. John didn't like it and declined to work on it, saying it was Paul's granny music. George Harrison didn't really enjoy working on it, so he's saying we had to keep playing it over and over again. But Ringo Starr had a different sort of opinion, and he felt it was granny music, but he said we do need stuff like this on the album. The song also has Paul McCartney playing George Harrison's Moog synthesizer on it as well. Now, track 4, Oh Darling, was performed and written by Paul McCartney. Now, apparently Paul used to come in once a day and was singing it, so he wanted his voice to sound as if he'd been on stage for a week. John actually thought, well, this song actually suits me a lot better, but Paul was the one who performed and wrote it in the end. Track 5, Octopus Garden. Now, track 5, Ringo Starr led the vocal on that, but he went to Sardinia with his family and stayed aboard Peter Sellers' yacht, and this is when he put it together. After Starr, he had left the band for 2 weeks during these sessions for the White Album. Starr received a full songwriting credit and composed all the lyrics, although the song's structure was partly written in the studio by George Harrison. Track 6, I Want You, She's So Heavy, was written by Lennon, and it was about his relationship with Ona. Lennon used Harrison's Moog synthesizer, and this created a wind effect. And then during the final edit, Lennon told Emmerich to cut it right there at 7 minutes and 44 seconds, which he did. This suddenly creates a sudden end to side 1 of Abbey Road, and the recording tape would have had another 20 seconds to run, but that's how it is, and if you actually listen to it you can hear that very sort of abrupt end to it. So that's side 1, and now we're going to come to side 2. Side 2, track 1, Here Comes the Sun. It was written by George Harrison in Eric Clapton's garden while having a break from the band. Harrison sang lead and played acoustic guitar. Ringo Starr played the drums, and Paul McCartney did the vocals and played bass. Lennon wasn't on this track at all. He was still recovering from his car accident, and George Martin provided a bit of the orchestral arrangement as well in collaboration with George Harrison. Now, track 2, Because. Now, this was all came about because John Lennon was listening to Yoko Ono playing Ludwig van Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata on the piano. He recalled I was lying out on the sofa in our house listening to Yoko playing, and suddenly I said, can you play those chords backwards? She did, and he wrote Because around them. The track features 3-part harmonies of Lennon, McCartney and Harrison, and then it was triple tracked to give sort of 9 voices in the final mix. Now, the band considered these vocals to be some of the difficult and hardest and most complex they had ever attempted. George Harrison played Moog synthesizer, and George Martin played the harpsichord that opens the track. Now I'm going to come to the last track now, and this was a sort of a melody which was put together by Paul McCartney. Now, the first track recorded on the melody was You Never Give Me Your Money, and then following that it was both Harrison and Lennon who provided guitar solos, with Lennon playing a solo at the end of the track. Then we go into Sun King, and then we follow that with Because, which showcases Lennon and McCartney's that triple track sort of harmonies. Following that, we've got Lennon's Mean Mr. Mustard, written during that trip for the Beatles did to India in 1968. Then we've got Polythene Pam, and then it turned in. They're followed by 4 McCartney songs, which She Came In Through the Bathroom Window, and that was after a fan entered Paul McCartney's residence and came through the bathroom window. Golden Slumbers. Now this was based on Thomas Decker's 17th century poem, and then they set it to music. And then we've got Carry That Weight, the vocals of all the 4 Beatles on that. The end featured Ringo Starr's drum solo from that Beatles catalogue, and it was mixed across 2 tracks, and it was in stereo. And it was really sort of about panning left and right back before that, but yes, they had true stereo for this album. And really that's it. It's really a great album and well worth looking into. If you haven't got it in your collection, I really do recommend it. Thank you very much for watching, and be along soon with some more. Bye for now. Bye.